don't want to blanket every association out there in that fashion. I mean, there's some that run smooth. They don't need our services, and that's all there is to it. And I'm comfortable with that.
We love
But
those associations.
it doesn't go that
Yeah.
way forever. I
Yeah.
mean, change is inevitable. Something's going to change. And, it only takes one individual in an association to really make things interesting. And it's been my experience that there's always at least one in every association. And that's regardless of the size, right?
HOA Insights is brought to you by 5 companies that care about board members: Association Insights and Marketplace, Association Reserves, Community Financials, Kevin Davis Insurance Services, and the Inspectors of Election. You'll find links to their website and social media in the show notes.
Welcome back to HOA Insights, Common Sense for Common Areas. I'm Robert Nordland, and I'm here today for episode number 156 with a special guest appearing on the program for a second time. You heard him previously on our episode number 133 because we felt that what he had to say to our board member audience continues to be true. Why should a board put in long hours preparing for a vote of any kind and then struggle to support or defend it? So we've titled this episode, Why Wrestle with a Vote? Well, of course, I'm speaking about Kurtis Peterson from the Inspectors of Election. I've seen Kurtis at the CAI national trade shows, wherever it appears in the country over decades, starting from the early days when online voting was novel. And nowadays the firm has grown and matured with the industry, and he's serving clients all around the country with confidence and efficiency, with an entire team supporting all their projects. There's so many types of elections and ways you can stumble setting up a vote of any kind, whether it's getting quorum, or an election of new board members seeking approval for a special assessment, or any one of these different types of voting situations where you need to reach out to your ownership in an official manner. You need to get it done and get it done in a way that there is no question of the validity of the results, so you don't have to do it over again. Well, we're here weekly, so if you missed last week's episode number 155 with 2 banking professionals about the riskiness of relying on getting a bank loan, you missed hearing that about 50% of loans get denied. So if you're relying on a loan, raise your assessments now in preparation. That's because the money to pay for a project or repay the loan that you're trying to get, that's going to need to come from somewhere. It needs to come from your association homeowner members. To catch that episode or any other prior episode, take a moment after today's program to listen from our podcast website, hoainsights.org, or watch on our YouTube channel. But better yet, subscribe from any of the major podcast platforms or our YouTube channel so you don't miss any future episodes. Becoming a subscriber also increases the podcast's ranking and search engines, helping others find this free resource so they can be better equipped to lead their association. And those of you watching on YouTube can see the HOA Insights mug that I have here that I got from our merch store, which you can browse through from our hoainsights.org website or the link in our show notes. You'll find we have some great free stuff there like board member Zoom backgrounds and some specialty items for sale like this mug. So go to the merch store, see what we have for sale, and at least download a free Zoom background for use in your next online meeting. Well, we enjoy hearing from you, responding to the issues you're facing at your association. So if you have a hot topic, a crazy story, or a question you'd like us to address, you can contact us at 805-203-3130 or email us at podcast@hoainsights.org. But today's episode is on me. In checking in with Kurtis, he's part of my circle of friends and industry resources, and he's also one of the sponsors of this webinar. He said he was crazy busy, and I was interested about that. When we're recording this, it's in April, and so I was trying to think, why is he crazy busy? So wanted to find out the problems he's solving, the boards he's serving. So welcome back to the program, Kurtis. Tell me right here at the start, what's causing the Inspectors of Election to be so busy right now?
Well, springtime is normally a busy time for us. We have a lot of large associations that are conducting their annual meetings and election of directors, and so we're doing a lot of production, getting product out the door, as well as facilitating the execution of the tabulation for those large elections as well. So just a lot of work, and a lot of new clients coming in, especially with the advent of online voting in California. And since we've been, performing online elections across the country since 2010, we were pretty prominent in that arena. So just, a lot of moving parts, crazy time of the year. It's
Okay,
really what it's
so
all about. It's just nuts.
interesting. Well, in the reserve study business, our busy time is in advance of the fiscal year end. So with most associations having a December 31st fiscal year end, our busy time is in the summer and fall. And so it sounds like after they close and they get to January, February, then it becomes annual meeting time. And that's where you fit in.
Yeah, not only annual meetings, but we've been increasingly busy throughout the year with a lot of amendments to governing documents, a lot of special assessments, especially here in California, and other variety of votes. Some require true membership approval, whether that's a capital improvement, grant of exclusive use, some of these other approval votes by the membership. So lots of things, a lot of things going on in associations right now.
I don't think I was aware that California had, I don't want to say banned, but online voting wasn't an option in California. So with that legislative change?
Yeah, that happened at the beginning of 2025.
Okay, cool. So you've been able to do online voting in California. And so being positioned where you are, a lot of California associations are all of a sudden knocking on your door.
Yeah, and we've been preparing for California to allow for online voting for really quite some time.
Okay.
And, have had our platform in place. Part of the biggest problem with the California online voting is the actual legislation itself. Elections in California are difficult to begin with just regular paper voting. And the new law is a little bit, makes it more tricky. It's not very streamlined, and hopefully they're going to clean that up. I've seen inklings of that. And I'm trying to get involved to help them smooth out some of that language, so it's a cleaner process for everybody, and especially the voter, because right now the California online elections they're just difficult.
Got it.
They're just tough.
That's got it. We see that again in our world when the legislators all of a sudden want to legislate something with respect to reserves, and the people writing those laws are not really sure what a condo is. And I imagine it's the same thing that
Yeah,
you're
I
involved
don't
with.
know where they come up with some of this stuff, to be honest with you. One of the things that you can't do online in California is a special assessment vote. That has to be paper.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. So why that is, I couldn't say, other than the fact that it's dealing with a lot of money, or specifically money for the associations. But nobody's given me an answer on that, and I don't expect they will. Maybe it was to ease the process of allowing for online voting in California, because there's been a lot of kickback in previous years for that to happen.
Can we say pushback and not kickback?
Pushback is probably a more appropriate term.
Yeah, especially when we're talking about money here.
It's been a lot of pushback, absolutely.
Yeah.
But here we are. So they took that element out of it and massaged other areas of the language in the civil code just to accommodate for it. But it really needs to be cleaned up to make the elections in California, especially online, a far more streamlined process.
Well, I would think that just as a culture, we are comfortable buying things off eBay from a stranger at a negotiated price. We're comfortable buying things from Amazon. We're comfortable checking our bank balances online.
Yeah, absolutely. And processing money with the IRS online.
Oh, gee. Yeah.
Who didn't do that yesterday? Huh?
Yeah. No,
Did you write a check? I don't know. I didn't write a check. I was online.
Yeah. For our audience, we're recording this on April 16th. So yes, yesterday was tax day. We have a number of companies, and some of them were checks, and because I made a run to the post office yesterday, and some of them were online. And I think they just differed in different states and different requirements. But yeah, we move a lot of money electronically, and Zelle and Venmo. We're doing so much electronically. I would expect that an election could be so much more efficient done online. Am I missing something?
No, sir. No, it is 100%. There's some associations we don't touch any paper ballots. It's either all online or it's not at all. So I did, that's just the way it is. And they get same turnout, and everybody seems happy with it. There's some election companies out there that don't touch paper ballots. They only provide online voting structures. It's the way of the world. Everybody works online.
Yeah. So you're saying that the inspectors of election also supports associations when they have paper ballots.
Yeah. In California, it's going to be a hybrid pretty much all of the time. There's different levels of hybrid. There's partial hybrid and there's full hybrid. In California, it'll be a partial hybrid scenario. Even in a 20-unit association, you're going to have one member that doesn't have an email address or opts out of voting electronically. So, you're creating one election package, one paper election package for that one member, and then the rest vote online. So, you just got to take it as it goes.
Yeah, I don't think I'd really appreciated that in your little 20-unit hypothetical there, you're almost running two elections in that case. The online election and then...
Yeah, that's exactly what to some degree, that is what it is. I mean, you've got to tabulate both, right? You've got to set up both. You got to set up a paper election package and you got to create the online election package. They have to mirror each other. And then you're facilitating both simultaneously. And we've done that since day one, really. We've always run a hybrid scenario, but it's, frustrating to create an election package for one or two people,
Well, there goes the secret vote. What happened in this election?
To some degree, if there's just one paper ballot.
Yeah, there was 19 and 1. Everyone knows who that number 1 was. It was unit number 13 who just...
Yeah, well, we follow the construct of the civil code, and says that, you put out a ballot that doesn't have any identifying information of the voter on it.
That's a good point. Except that it's the only one that came in with a postmark.
Right. From our perspective as the inspector of election, when we produce the results, we don't tell anybody whether they voted via paper or online. Here's your results, right? So even though there was that one paper voter, I guess we would know because it'd be the only one, but that certainly wouldn't be information that would be shared.
That's a good point. That's another reason to have an election company facilitating this, because it's not like all the ballots are going to George the president's house, because otherwise George the president would know exactly what's going on with that one. Tell me, every time I talk to you about the actual process of doing an election, I'm amazed at how complicated it is. So are there some clients that come to you and say, we need your help, and you look at what they've been doing and you're saying, I'm surprised you made it this long without us? Is there some things that make you think that this association's election process is doomed from the start?
Well, we don't usually look at previous election product when we get a new client, per se. We just kind of work them into our realm of what we know is legal, not only in accordance with their governing documents, but also with the state statute or civil code here in California that we need to accommodate. So whatever they've done in the past may be changed. A lot of times we don't know whether they've been doing it properly or not. Sometimes we will request something from a previous year to make sure that the structure that we're putting together this year is coalescent with what they've done previously. And when I say something like that, an example would be, how many open positions did you put up for election last year? If it's a 5-member board and they're staggered, and last year they had 3 open positions for a 2-year term, then this year we know that we would have 2 open positions for a
Right.
2-year. So we may request it in that sense, and sometimes, we have to roll our eyes and say, "Oh my, what happened here?"
Holy moly.
This is going to look a little bit different this
Yeah,
year.
yeah.
There's no doubt, a lot cleaner, and just our balloting process and the fact that we have a scannable ballot versus check marks or ticks on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper is, it's just it's kind of a real learning curve and a good one for people saying, well, why didn't we do it like this before?
Yeah.
So, having being our 20th year now, Robert, I don't know if you knew that, but we started in
Wait.
2006, so we're
I thought you
celebrating our
said
20th year.
since 2010.
That's when we started our online voting, was in
Ah,
2010, but we started the company in 2006. So,
well, congrats.
uh,
Happy anniversary.
yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we've seen a lot, done a lot, and we've seen what works and what doesn't, and what's legal and what's not.
Yeah, I would imagine there's a pretty healthy chunk of your clients that you come in, you bring order to the situation, and just like you said a moment ago, they realize, oh, wow, there's law about this. And why are we doing this? And you say, well, it's been law in your state for 7 years now. And they scratch their head and say, okay, they bury that thought and glad that they didn't have it contested previously. Um, Well, let me ask, is having an independent election, I got at least a couple questions. Is it more valuable to have an independent election supervisor for a small association where you don't want to be bumping elbows, you know each other too much? Or is it more important with a large association where, if it's a couple thousand people, then I don't mean to say this casually, but if you miscount by 1 or 2 votes, it's almost no big deal. The majority is the majority and it's going to work out. Is there one or the other that is actually clearly more important and I just don't get it?
Well, I don't know if one or the other is really more important. The smaller the association, the more contentious it can be, right? Because there always seems to be somebody that's at odds with the other ones. And
Okay.
we've done associations as small as 3 units, right?
Okay.
And they came to us because they knew that they couldn't handle it internally. And this was for a special assessment, and that requires more than 50% to vote. And of course, it requires then more than 50% of those that do vote to approve.
Okay.
So in a 3-unit association, more than 50% is 2.
Yep.
But if you only have 2 ballots, you can't get that measure to pass because you can't get a majority vote, even if they, well, I suppose you could, I
Yeah,
guess,
you could have two.
if they both voted for it. So,
If it's, yeah.
it's tough in those situations. And so for an independent third party like us to handle it, it takes all that guesswork out, right? We're following the law. These guys know what they're doing. They've done it over and over and over. And this is going to be a valid election at the end because it is an independent third party. They did follow the law. There's no room for contest, right?
I like that. Well, I'm looking at the clock. It's time to take a quick break and have time to hear from one of our generous sponsors. But I want to come back and I want to talk about that. What's a contentious voting situation look like? So everyone will be right back in a few minutes with more common sense for common areas.
Are you part of a homeowners association or condominium board? Making the right financial decisions for your community's future is crucial. At Association Reserves, we're proud to serve communities nationwide, specializing in reserve studies tailored to your community's unique needs. Our expert team helps you accurately assess your property's assets, forecast future expenses, and develop a solid funding plan. Whether you're a small HOA or a large condominium association, we've got you covered. Visit reservestudy.com to learn more and get a proposal for your association.
And we're back. Well, we were discussing over the break, Kurtis and I, on the value of the work he does, and even in the first half of the program, my anxiety was going down just thinking of having someone like inspectors of election on my team. So, Kurtis, you tell me the value of having someone like inspectors of election on their team, specifically in a situation where it's a sensitive vote, maybe a special assessment, or it's going to be a contested election. There's been a opposition faction trying to win votes, and it's got to be right. Tell me how you
Yeah.
bring value to the table there.
Well, one of the biggest values that we set forth starting out was just that, we're an independent third party. We don't have any interest in the outcome of any of the elections. Our only interest is to make sure that they're facilitated legally and fairly to the members of the association. So I think that's where the real value is, and value added would be the fact that we've got a ton of experience. We've been doing this a long time. We're familiar with, governing documents, how to read them, what to look for. And then, of course, the state statutes and civil codes, and how that affects, how we're going to, conduct the election, whatever that may be. And when we're talking about contentious elections, the toughest ones are always the recalls, right? Special assessments are interesting as well because you're dealing with money. But the platform for a special assessment is usually set forth very, very clearly that there's a reason for this, and boards aren't doing it nilly-willy.
Yeah, the roof's leaking, folks.
Roofs need repair. Our reserve funds are crazy low. We got to get those back up to where they need to be. We've got failing pipes, all kinds of things for a special assessment. But the recall elections really seem to get, personal. That's personal for people. It's, the people that are signing the petitions to get these board members recalled, are very serious about what they believe the reason for these board members to be recalled. And we just don't get involved in any of that. We're not interested in the politics of any one association. We're interested in facilitating a fair and legal election for everybody, abiding by the governing documents and abiding by the state statutes.
You don't know who the good guys or the bad guys are.
We don't want to know. That's not.
The opposition party may be the good guys coming in to rescue an association, and the opposition may be the bad guys just hating their HOA, running on the election platform that they're going to disband the association. And
we tend to see an uptick in recall elections after special assessments.
Interesting, but I'm not surprised.
It's like, oh, you're having a special assessment? Well, should we go ahead and get your pricing for a recall right after the thing too?
Yeah, no, I get it. Well, let me ask you about that. You handle voting, you handle elections. I wonder if your end product is really peace of mind, that you are providing transparency, you're providing confidence, that this portion of a board's responsibilities is going to be A-OK, no special interests involved.
Not only the boards, like that they're, they've got a company like ours, conducting the election, but also management. Nobody's pointing fingers at management saying, hey, you're doing this, or you've got all the ballots. Why are they going to, where are they? What's our count? Where's mine? You're mishandling them. And so when the board and management passes that off to an independent third party like us, yeah, it is. It should be. If it's not, a sigh of relief saying, thank God we don't have to deal with this. But on the flip side, I've seen other associations that they grip onto, some of the control of these elections, with an iron fist. And it's like, well, you don't need to tell us how to do our job here, albeit you're the lead of the election committee. You don't have any real responsibilities if you're going to contract with us. You can still oversee the vetting of the candidates, or you can, conduct the candidate forum, whatever the case may be. But we're going to be preparing the election packages. You can review it for accuracy. We're going to be sending out all the ballots. They're going to come back to us. And then, we're going to be tabulating the results and then providing them to you for announcement or whatever the case may be. So, that's it's a hands-off approach for the associations, which is how it was designed in the California Civil Code anyway, that an independent third party must, perform this process. Now, the state or the civil code does allow for a volunteer homeowner to do that. But having done this for 20 years, I can't imagine anybody that would want to take on this kind of responsibility and the potential for litigation, really.
Right.
If they don't know what they're doing and they're not privy to the civil code and their governing documents, and the manager's facilitating it and saying, here, they're putting their head on the chopping block.
Yeah, that's a lot of risk.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who would do that as a volunteer. That's crazy.
Well, I think there's some things that are pretty obvious that volunteers shouldn't be doing. They shouldn't be putting a new roof on the building. That requires special insurance, special skills. It's not something you want the average person up there doing and falling off a roof and just everything unwinding. And I think elections is moving into that area where my sense is it's becoming more and more something that the average board member, the average volunteer shouldn't be messing with this. They're just too much of a minefield.
Yeah, I don't recommend it. There are some associations, I don't want to blanket every association out there in that fashion. I mean, there's some that run smooth. They consistently have good people stepping up and, serving on the board. And they don't need our services, and that's all there is to it. And I'm comfortable with that.
We love those associations.
It doesn't go that way forever. I mean, change is inevitable. Something's going to change. And, it only takes one individual in an association to really make things interesting. And it's been my experience that there's always at least one in every association. And that's regardless of the size, right?
Interesting.
So, I just... Don't get caught.
Don't get caught. Well, how much of this movement towards needing an inspectors of election is driven by legislation, or is it the rising incivility that we see in our society?
Well, in California, it certainly was legislation in 2020 that came around that required that. Nobody under contract, and this is California only, California says that anybody under contract with the association cannot act as the inspector of election other than being the inspector of election. So management companies used to be primarily spearheading the voting processes for their associations. But when that law passed, then they could no longer do it. And I think that's a good thing. And I'm not saying that because it affected our business one way or another. I just, working with managers in this industry, know that they're real close to the boards. And if the boards don't like something, it's a real pressure on the manager to accommodate them to some degree. Now whether that affects the outcome of an election or not, I wouldn't say, and I couldn't say.
Yep.
But they've got to live with those boards, right? We just come in and do the election and then we walk away. So we're not stuck in there. If something doesn't go the way the board likes it, next thing you know, the manager or the management company is out the door.
Well, you've mentioned many times your experience specifically in California, and you and I are from California, full disclosure. Are there other states that are not allowing online voting at this time? Is it a checkerboard or is it a majority type situation?
Well, no, California was the only one that I know of that prohibited or didn't allow. I mean, the way that the civil code was set up, that it was only paper balloting. There's other states that don't say either way.
Okay.
That you just have to get a ballot out there.
Got it.
And then other states came into online voting, like Florida, quite a while ago, 2015, 2017, something like that, or maybe even earlier, where they implemented online voting. And they did it in what I felt to be a very nice, structured fashion, that it was more of an opt-in scenario, or if you wanted to vote electronically, you certainly could, but you needed to opt in to do so.
Got it.
And then once you opted in, you were you're opted in for good unless you'd like to opt out again.
Yeah, which is,
Stop.
like you said, it creates a hybrid situation where you have some people voting the old way and some people voting the new way. And I think of me in, I want to say regular government elections, I'm a permanent mail-in voter. I don't like to go to the voting booth and stand in line. I like to lay out my options and figure them out and take the time I need. And when I'm done, I pop it in the mail. And that's a nice thing to be able to do. I think one last thing that we need to talk about is, and you mentioned it a few times, making sure the candidates are selected correctly, that they're the right candidates for the right reasons. How much, how long in advance of an election does someone need to reach out to you? It sounds like there's a lot of prep involved.
Well, that's
Is that hard to say?
it is. Well, it's hard to say. It's not hard to say for me, but it's not
Okay.
an easy answer to. It's not a, for every election you call us 9 months ahead of time, or every election you call us 6 months ahead of time.
Okay.
It depends on number one, the state. Number two, it depends on the voting scenario, whether that's an election of directors, an amendment, a special assessment, whatever the case may be. And then, in California here, there's a election by acclimation where you really need to start it early because the nomination period is 90 days.
Okay.
So you've got a 3-month nomination period. So if you're planning on doing election by acclamation in California specifically, yeah, you better be calling us 7 to 9 months ahead of time, so we can prepare appropriately.
Acclamation is?
An election by acclamation is when you go through the nomination process and you have the same number or fewer candidates than you do open positions on the board.
3 people for 3 spots. Why are we voting?
Right. Yeah.
Got
There's no need to put out a ballot in that case. So other states, it's automatic, and it's, a nomination period of 30 days or sometimes even 15, that allows just automatically for election by acclamation. But, in this state, specifically California, it's a much longer process. And I think they're working on changing that. I have seen the language for that, where they're going to knock the 90 days down to a normal 30-day period. Advantageous.
Let's see if anyone in Sacramento is listening to this. Yeah.
You don't need 90 days to figure out whether you're going to run for the board, right? And the fun thing is even after 90 days, we get these candidates that come in 5 minutes late. We've got a 5 o'clock deadline on this date, and they come in a day later or 5 minutes after the deadline, and you've had 90 days.
Yeah.
So it's almost like too long anyway.
Yeah.
Right. 60 days would probably it would be better, but 30 days is appropriate. And if you're serious about running for the board and you're a viable candidate, in my mind anyway, that you take that seriously, to serve your community, and you get your nomination in a timely fashion. If you've got bigger things going on and you don't got time to get your nomination in, then guess what? Maybe you should focus on something else than serving your association. And I don't want to prohibit anybody from doing this important volunteer work for their association. Don't get me wrong. I always find it funny that after 90 days, we get a couple people, from time to time, we get somebody that comes in a few minutes late.
Yeah. Well, someone on the East Coast. Yeah. I can imagine someone on an East Coast association who lives out in the West Coast, and they will miss it by the difference between Eastern time and Pacific time, just because they're chasing the deadline.
They may. Yeah.
Yeah. But we're all about trying to encourage and equip board members on this podcast. So we want the best board members. We want the right board members sitting on the board. And it's just great, Kurtis, to have you on the program to talk about insights on how to do this whole process well. Any closing thoughts to add at this time?
I just want to reiterate that, we're here, really trying to serve the association the best way that we can. We really appreciate all the board members that do spend their time and efforts trying to help not only their association, but the industry.
Fantastic. Well, if you'd like to get in touch with Kurtis or learn more about online voting, you can go to their website, simply enough, at theinspectors.org. theinspectorsofelection.com. Just you write it out, and that's their URL, theinspectorsofelection.com. Well, we certainly hope you learned some HOA insights from our discussion today that helps you bring common sense and maybe some peace of mind to your association and your common areas. We look forward to having you join us for another great episode next week.
You've been listening to HOA Insights, Common Sense for Common Areas. You can listen to the show on our podcast website, hoainsights.org, or subscribe on any of the most popular podcast platforms. You can also watch the show on our YouTube channel. Check the show notes for helpful links. If you like the show and want to support the work we do, you can do so in a number of ways. The most important thing you can do is engage in the conversation. Leave a question in the comments section on our YouTube video. You can also email your questions or voice memos to podcast@hoainsights.org or leave us a voicemail at 805-203-3130. If you gain any insights from the show, please do us a huge favor by sharing the show with other board members you know. You can also support us by supporting the brands that sponsor this program. Please remember that the views and opinions expressed by the podcast do not constitute legal advice. You'll want to consult your own legal counsel before making any important decisions. Finally, this podcast was expertly mixed and mastered by Stokelight Video and Marketing. With Stokelight on your team, you'll reach more customers with marketing expertise that inspires action. See the show notes to connect with Stokelight.